Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double 18 podcast. Thanks for joining me on this third consecutive night. I'm your host, Stephen Negishi. Baseball season is just around the corner, and as an avid Cub fan, I am excited to welcome back this next guest. We had him on back in almost 6 months ago. It is Mr. Alex Patt, who is the writer for the Cubbies Crib, part of the Fan Sided Network. Alex, good evening, and thanks for joining me on this Thursday evening. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Ready to talk some baseball. I got the Cubs game on in the background, the spring training game. So we'll be following along as we do this show.
Yep.
It's coming quick. Next thing you know, we're going to be on that plane. The Cubs are going to be on that plane going towards Texas to start the season. It goes really, really quick.
It really is. It's hard to believe. We're already March in 2024 already, when we were just welcoming in the New Year's just not too far ago. But very, very excited to talk about the Cubs, and there are some optimistic reasons to discuss about the Cubs. So let's get right to it. And the Cubs have had somewhat of a slow off season. There's no question about that. And I wanted to know from your perspective, Alex. Obviously, the Cubs may have somewhat salvaged their off season with the recent resigning, I should say, of Cody Bellinger. So overall, on a scale of A through F, how do you grade the Cubs off season?
So I was thinking about that earlier today, and I kind of want to give it in the B minus range because I do think that signing Cody Bellinger, bringing him back, was a large element of this offseason, no matter what you did. And
Right.
I mean, listen, we can make the argument, oh, hey, well, you're back to where you were last year, but you know what? You could have easily lost Cody Bellinger, and then you had to replace him. And there was a seemingly solid odd that Cody Bellinger was going to be elsewhere going into this offseason. So, consider where you were in October when the season ended. You got to be happy that Cody Bellinger's back and that he's part of this equation. And I think the players would say the same thing. Obviously, the biggest move of the offseason was the shocking hiring of Craig Counsell. And that's not nothing. That was a seismic move that happened really early on. It was November 6th. And, I've said it before. Am I as much of a David Ross hater as some other people? No, but let's be real. If you had the choice between David Ross or Craig Counsell, you're taking Craig Counsell 10 times out of 10. And Craig Counsell is going to prove to be very valuable going forward because you have a lot of flex on this current roster with a lot of young guys that maybe don't have a permanent home in a position right now. So who would you trust better than Craig Counsell to make those decisions? And he's been empowered to make those decisions. So that was a big addition. Obviously, signing Shota Imanaga, adding a piece to the rotation, adding Hector Neris, a very good piece for the bullpen. Those were two very solid moves. Now, do I wish more could have been done? Yes. And, I think you and I can both agree that we can't really be too hard on the Cubs for Shohei Ohtani because he wanted to be a Dodger. I mean,
Sure.
he didn't want to come here. He wanted to be in LA. Same with Yamamoto. So those were two historic outliers,
Yeah.
But, there were other guys out there, and there's still guys out there too. Jordan Montgomery is still out there. Blake Snell is still out there. And
Right.
they're probably going to get that smaller deal that, Bellinger and Chapman got as well. So, maybe there is one more move in this offseason. I'm not saying there definitely will be, but was it the offseason that we all dreamt of? No, because let's be real, our dreams of an offseason are always a little higher than they normally end up being, but I don't want to say it's a bad offseason by any means.
Mhm. Yeah, it's somewhat of a, I think re-signing Cody Bellinger may have, lifted up the grade to somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, perhaps that may have saved the season before it even began.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of work still has to be done. I do like the addition of Hector Neris to bolster the bullpen because considering how bad the bullpen was toward the end of the year, which kind of is the reason why they lost out on the final
Yep.
playoff spot, which Arizona took it away from the Cubs, and we all know what happened in the offseason, in the postseason with the Arizona going all the way to the World Series. And you're probably asking ourselves, that could have been us,
Sure.
that could have been us, the Cubs, and it's a valid reason as to, if the Cubs are, seriously committed to winning. And now, if you're looking back at the Cody Bellinger deal, that was a 3 for $80 million, which he can opt out after this year. We just kind of surprised that, that's how much of a price it dropped when it was thought to be maybe in the $200 million range that, people were expecting, given that he was Scott Boris's client.
Well, I think if you would have asked me a few months ago, then I would have been more surprised. But the fact that the market just wasn't nearly as robust as Scott Boras thought it was going to be, he probably thought there were going to be more players in on this asset. But I think other teams looked at the Scott Boras asking price, and it's not that they didn't want Cody Bellinger, it's that they didn't want to pay him for 8+ years and be tied down to that kind of contract. So they said, hey, listen, we would like a player like Cody Bellinger, but we don't want to play the waiting game like the Cubs were waiting to do. So teams like the Blue Jays and the Giants went out and did other things. And I thought that going into the offseason, a key player for Bellinger was going to be the Yankees, but they right away jumped on that Juan Soto. So that kind of took them out of the need right there. So as time went on, and it was clear that the Cubs were really the front runner and the team that was most likely to get him back, it made sense that that price did drop. There was one other team I was a little curious about in terms of being in Cody Bellinger, and that was the Angels, because Art Moreno, as we know, likes to spend, and he likes to make moves that might scratch some people's heads, but in his mind says, hey, we just lost Shohei Ohtani. We need to keep some butts in the seats and somebody else with Mike Trout. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't have surprised me if Art Moreno would have thrown a lot of money towards him, but obviously that didn't happen. And then the Cubs waited it out. They negotiated, and now it's making even more sense because we saw Matt Chapman get a similar deal.
Mm-hmm. So in a way that the market correction and the luck certainly played a huge role in Cody Bellinger returning. Now, there are a couple of players still out there, mostly Scott Boris's client, Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, among others. Those are probably the ones that are really, really the two of the big ones that I can think of at this moment. I think Blake Snell's kind of out of the question right now. Maybe Jordan Montgomery could be the one that, another Boris client that the Cubs may have a legitimate shot at. Where do you put the signing of Jordan Montgomery with the Cubs right now on a scale of percentage wise?
That's a good question. Because I'll tell you right now, I don't think it's absolute zero. I just don't know how high it would be. Because here are my two questions. I think if the price comes down, it's not as much of a concern about the price, even though the Cubs are pretty hell-bent on staying within the luxury tax, kind of under that threshold. But the way I see it is, and this is not me speaking for me, it's me speaking about the Cubs. I just wonder if they look at the situation and say, well, we have 6 or 7 possible starters. Can we fit in another one, especially if down the road we want to get like Cade Horton a shot?
Yeah.
But, Jordan Montgomery is a proven commodity. And I know they already have several lefties in the rotation. You have Justin Steele, you have Shota Imanaga, and you're probably going to have Jordan Wicks. I would imagine if he's going to be on the big league roster, it's hard for me to see him being in the bullpen. I would imagine him being in the rotation. And then you got Hendricks and you got Tyone. So you wonder where he fits, but he is such a good pitcher and would make your team better. So I'll say 20%. It's not overly high, but it's not zero. And I do think that he can come at an affordable price as this, market keeps going and we're well into spring training. He's going to want to sign. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. Some people have brought up with me and said, hey, the Cardinals might have just lost their big free agent signing in Sonny Gray. They signed him to a deal. He came out of a game in spring. Jordan Montgomery, he played for the Cardinals, and that price is coming down. Could they scoop him up? Maybe that does happen. So keep an eye on Jordan Montgomery, because I do think wherever he lands, he's going to make an impact for a team that's trying to win.
You mentioned Imanaga earlier. He was actually the first big signing, well before Cody Bellinger actually inked with the Cubs, re-signed with the Cubs. He is not as highly prolific as, say, Yamamoto was when he was signed with the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, with the Ohtani signing and Yamamoto signing with the Dodgers, thanks to largely due to Ohtani deferring most of his contract to allow the flexibility for the Dodgers. And, basically, given the history of the Dodgers and the Asian market, they seem to have cornered the market for decades to come. And yet somehow the Cubs were lucky enough to sign Imanaga. He did make his first, start against, ironically, of all teams, the Dodgers. He did, gave up a 3-run home run, but it was largely due to an error by Nico Horner and a questionable strike call that could have gone either way. Imanaga, in a Japanese interview, said that he needs to improve his fastballs a little bit more, or at least rely more so on maybe other pitches that he was using. I believe was a slider to get more strikeouts later in that ball game. Did you notice that a little bit? And then what do you think of realistic expectations for Imanaga in this upcoming year?
Yeah, Imanaga, he's a type of guy that misses a lot of bats, but he's not necessarily throwing 98, 99, 100. He relies a lot on movement and location. And if you look at his stats in Japan, his command is very, very good. And the fact that his command is very, very good and he strikes out a lot of batters, well, he also goes fastball heavy. And the one weakness really is being prone to the home run ball. So I think he understands that he's going to need to make some adjustments here, because listen, if you're playing at Wrigley Field on a warm day, you don't want to be leaving too many fastballs up, because they will get hit into the bleachers. So, spring training is the great opportunity for him to kind of see what works, get a sense of facing some MLB hitters. And then that's kind of how you start to make adjustments. You work on where you're locating a fastball, how much you're using it, and what counts you use it in, because we know the guy has the stuff to get the swing and miss, but you're just going to have to use it in different ways. Because listen, a lot of guys in this league, sure, they have sliders that move and other pitches that use movement, but a lot of guys these days, especially, they could throw 99, 100. And, he just has to make adjustments, because he's throwing really, 92, 93, 94 tops. So it's not like he's a slow thrower, but compared to some of the flamethrowers that we see, like Yamamoto, he can really, really throw some heat. That's just going to require some work. And I think that he's going to have more good starts than bad, but I do think there's going to be moments in the season where you're just going to see some growing pains. And that's just something we're going to have to work with, and something that we have to understand with. There are going to be some games where he gets clubbed pretty hard, I think. And there's going to be some games where he makes adjustments and, he gets a lot of swings and misses and looks very, very sharp. So I'd say just be prepared for some ups and downs, but I think that the stuff this guy brings is very positive.
I've seen him pitch in Japan, and his numbers in Japan aren't exactly like overly impressive. He probably won like 60 or 70 games in his 8-year career there. He was a college pitcher in Japan. Like you said, his high fastballs have been like 92 through 94 with a lot of movements. I did call one of the Chicago stations when it was officially announced that he will give up home runs quite often on in a place like Wrigley Field, which is smaller, and obviously on a windy day, definitely ball will carry. In a city like Yokohama, which is like a port town right by the Pacific Ocean, it's somewhat similar. It does get windy, dry on a good day. So I hope that the Cubs fans will realize that we're not getting like Otani or Yamamoto type pitcher. We're
Right.
getting more of a somewhat, a guy who relies on his, not for for his fastball flamethrower, but more guys who tries to, get ahead of the count with his, array of pitches, and they have to be certainly patient.
Sure.
This is his first year, obviously coming over from Japan. Obviously, it's a new league. He's certainly, trying to embrace himself. Obviously, we know about his introductory press conference, and there was a article on the Athletic about how he is embracing the, being in Chicago, and that he wanted Chicago to pursue him, and obviously ended up happening. So certainly there are real good expectations for him, but hopefully the fans will show some sort of a understanding that it will take time for him, and that there will be times where he's going to look really, really bad, like giving up four home runs in one game or something like that. So I hope that the fans will show their patience. So the rotation right now pretty looks set right now, with or without Montgomery signing right now. So one big guy that was, who started off pretty slow and did decently in the second half, and big expectations are expected, it would be Jameson Taillon. He hasn't pitched yet, obviously, but what happened last year, obviously he's coming off an injury and still ended up signing with the Cubs, and he didn't really look good at all pretty much all season. What is your expectations for Taillon this upcoming season?
Yeah, so, Taillon, we obviously saw kind of the tale of the two halves. The first half, things really, really got ugly, and he didn't really know where his pitches were going. He was trying to throw sweepers, he was trying to throw things in certain counts that I think the Cubs are trying to get him to do, but then he kind of made adjustments to kind of where he's more comfortable, and we saw much better results in the final few months. He threw some really good games. He looked more comfortable out there, more confident in his stuff, and I do think that if that is the trend on where we're going, that he can go out there and he can be successful in 2024. So I actually do like him bouncing back in 2024. Am I saying he's going to be a Cy Young winner? No. And I mean, I'm looking at, if he throws like a 3.8, 3.9 ERA, I think you're pretty happy with that. And one of the things too with Taillon is he was healthy last year, which is good. Now this year, he hasn't pitched yet, and you just hope that he's healthy and he's able to go out there and give you the starts. Now, obviously, they have the pitching depth if he's not able to, but I feel like a key for his consistency is going out there, staying healthy, because I do think when he does find a groove, he can execute pretty well. For example, there was a game I went to against the Cardinals, and I think it was late July, and the Cubs won that game easily, and Taillon threw a really, really good ball game. And big thing, he strike one to every batter. He was getting ahead of the count, because we saw last year he would get ahead in the count early, but he couldn't put guys away. But then when he was hitting strike one later in the season, he was able to put guys away. There was a big difference there, because sure, half the battle is getting ahead in the count, but early in the season, he really had trouble putting guys away, and then he got better at it. So if he's able to get ahead in the count consistently and put those guys away when he should, then you're going to see much better results.
Obviously, the ace of this staff is Justin Steele. Do you have any concerns with Steele this upcoming year, considering he was never what you consider a big workhorse? When he was coming up through the ranks, and last year, he had a phenomenal year, and you do worry about being overused and everything. But any concerns with Justin Steele this upcoming season?
Right now, no. Obviously, last year was his career high in innings, and we expected that maybe towards the end it wasn't going to be quite as efficient, which we saw, and it wasn't really much of a surprise. Unfortunately, just the timing wasn't very good, as everything was kind of coming apart at the end. But I think that now that Steele has that experience of getting some of those innings under his belt. He kind of knows better how to condition himself now because, he never experienced throwing that many innings before. So I think that now that he kind of has that under his belt, he can move forward and be able to condition himself better. Now, would I be surprised if there's a tiny bit of regression from last year's performance? No, but I don't think it's going to be anything where it's like, oh, he goes from like a low threes ERA to like a 4+ pitcher. But, maybe you see him throw like a 350, 360 type ERA, which is still very, very good. So that wouldn't surprise me as much. But the good thing is that he still has Yan Gomes to work with, who he has praised over and over again. And having that consistency behind the plate and leadership behind the plate does, I think, make a difference. So he'll have that same consistency in this next year with him being back there.
So we'll move on to the bullpen, which was the one that really costed so many games throughout this year. The big addition, of course, is the Hector Neris from the Astros. He's got a winning experience with the Astros, pitched in big games for them in the playoffs and also in the World Series. Obviously, Neris right now would be the probably the guy that would be expected to pitch a lot. Obviously, Caleb Killian suffered an injury in his arm. He's on the 60-day DL, unfortunately.
Tough one.
It's a tough one, unfortunately. One of the key pieces acquired from the San Francisco Giants in the Chris Bryant trade doesn't seem to have much luck. And with the Cubs, Wisniewski, Ben Brown, Assad, it looks like Jerry Kuas, who was acquired last year. There are some intriguing arms. Luke Little, a rookie last year, a left, very big guy who can throw a lot. Yodan Almonte, who was acquired from the Dodgers in the trade for Michael Busch and Jackson Ferris, I believe, that the Cubs have to give up to the Dodgers. What is your overall expectations on the Cubs bullpen right now? Do they have enough arms, or do you still want some of the guys to really assert themselves?
Well, this is a spot in spring training where you try to piece things together because it's really difficult with bullpens. A lot of relievers are very, very fickle. They go from having a good year to a not so good year. And then you often see where guys kind of just come out of nowhere in an organization, or you kind of just pick up some veteran arm somewhere, you plug him in and he does really, really well. So I think what I'm going to be curious to see, number one, is can Alzolay be that closer again like he was last year? Because Alzolay was overall very efficient. He wasn't dominant like other closers are, but he efficiently got the job done. Because, he throws good stuff, but, you see some of the elite closers throwing, like, Johan Duran on the Twins. He somehow throws sinkers triple digits. I don't know how he does it. Alzolay is not quite at that level, but he was very efficient. And I don't think he has the fear or isn't capable of mentally being that guy, because we've seen him go out there. We see how pumped up he gets. He likes being in that situation. So, physically and mentally, I have no doubt he can do the job. It's just execution in that spot is very, very hard. So, right now we're entrusting him to do that again. I think Hector Neris is your setup man, 7th or 8th inning. That's where he thrives the most. And then you look at these other options that are in there. Will Hayden Wesneski be that guy? We hope so, because he's got the stuff. It's the execution, the location. You look at a guy like Julian Merriweather. Remember how good he was last year? He kind of came out of nowhere. Is he going to be at that level again? He was one of those guys you could rely on saying, hey, we need a strikeout. He could strike out a guy. And I know people were kind of iffy about Jose Cuas last year. He came over in that trade with the Royals, and he was up and down. He had some rough moments, but I do think that he's got something in him. I really, really do. I actually like Jose Cuas, I think, more than the average Cubs fan. You mentioned Luke Little, big lefty arm. You need a big lefty arm. And then, heck, I think Drew Smyly is much better suited in the bullpen, so I think he'll be okay there. The two questions I do have is, can Mark Leiter Jr. repeat what he did last year? Because if you remember, despite being a righty, he was really tough on the lefties with that splitter. He was really effective. We saw him kind of slow down at the end because, like Justin Steele, he threw more big league innings than he ever had in his career. So I think his arm was just feeling tired. Can he do that again? That's kind of up for grabs. And then will we see a guy like Almonte make the roster and be effective? The good thing about the Cubs is they have the pitching depth within that entire system. So there is hope that you'll be able to find guys if needed. The other guy I forgot to mention too, and I'll mention him really quick, who I think is going to be the swing man in the rotation and bullpen to eat multiple innings. That's going to be Javier Assad. Now, Javier Assad really stepped up last year and got good results. I do wonder about regression, though. I really, really do. You know, he wasn't a guy that blew smoke by you, and his fielding independent pitching was notably higher than his ERA. So can he be able to pitch to that same type of fortune again? We'll see. But I think for now, you can say, okay, he's going to be in that bullpen as a swingman. So is it a murderer's row bullpen? No, but I do think it could get the job done. And I do think that within the season, whether you trade for someone, pick someone up, or you call someone up for the bullpen, then you'll be able to find more solutions, because you look at an opening day bullpen for a team and you look at October, it never is quite exactly the same. I mean, you remember 2016, Hector Rondon was one of the most underrated closers. Oh, by the way, you got Aroldis Chapman midseason, so things look different by the end. That's going to be what happens this year too.
What about Ben Brown? I kind of see him as a wild card.
Sure.
He certainly has got a good stuff, and he's still only 24 right now.
Mm-hmm.
But probably more than likely, he might ended up getting squeezed out and start at AAA Iowa, which is not a bad thing. But
no.
Where do you see his long-term future?
Well, I think that he's definitely going to be part of the Cubs pitching staff. I think that if you look at the two pitching prospects that a lot of people talk about, Ben Brown or Horton, I think that Brown is kind of the one where I look at and say, I could see him swinging either way. Where like Horton, I see him being a starter, but I wouldn't be surprised if they give him a shot at being a starter this year if he comes up, if the opportunity is there. I mean, let's be real. Pitchers get hurt, both starters and relievers. So there very well is going to be that opportunity for guys like him to come up. I mean, listen, we just lost Caleb Killian. That opens an opportunity for somebody. So right now, I think it's possible he could go either or as a starter or as a reliever. But whatever opportunity he gets potentially when he first comes up, really, regardless of what it is, you hope he could come up and kind of be another power arm that you can have on your team, because I do think having more power arms going forward is important.
My guest tonight is Alex Patt, the writer from the Cubbies.com, part of the Fansided Network. Let's move on to the offense for a moment. Position players, catchers. Starting with catchers, Young Gomes and Miguel Amaya. We know Gomes had a terrific season. He certainly had made big plays with his bat during regular season. But the Cubs do have, a young catcher in Miguel Amaya that they are still high on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still see Gomes getting like maybe 100 games or more, or do you still see at some point Amaya kind of starts to assert himself and become like more of a regular catcher this year?
Yeah, you'll see Amaya get more chances, I think, but Yan Gomes is still your number one guy, especially since he's going to be working with some of the veteran pitchers he worked with before. Like I said, you don't want to disrupt that chemistry or anything, but Miguel Amaya is definitely going to have, more of a chance. And the fact that he's going to come up, starting opening day as the other catcher on the big league club, it'll be kind of his first opening day experience. So he'll be able to kind of keep thriving on that. So, Miguel Amaya is going to keep building up because Yan Gomes isn't going to be here forever. He's 36 and, eventually he's going to move on. So I think the Cubs would love to make Miguel Amaya their number one guy in the future. So he'll get his opportunities for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking into the infield, pretty much, the infield is set with Nico Hoerner and Dansby Swanson. Obviously, two terrific defenders in the infield, which certainly helps a lot. The questions are at the both corners, first base and third base. Let's look at the first base first of all. Do you see Cody playing more first base?
I think that time will come when Cody Bellinger will be at first when P. Crow Armstrong comes up. Because I think if P. Crow Armstrong remains down in AAA, sure, you'll see Cody play some first, but I think Cody Bellinger will play more time in center if P. Crow Armstrong is down. Now, there could be some days where you say, hey, we want Cody Bellinger to play first, and Mike Tauchman can play center. So I think that you will still see some Cody Bellinger at first, but I think he's probably going to be your primary center fielder, assuming P. Crow Armstrong starts the year in AAA. Because I do think that the Cubs want to get a good look at Michael Busch at first base as well. They didn't make that trade for nothing. And, it was a riskier trade when you didn't have Cody Bellinger. Now that you do have Cody Bellinger, you can say, okay, you have a safety net there. Because Cody Bellinger can play the position very, very well. And, you rely on him to be productive, where Michael Busch he's an older prospect, but he's still a prospect with upside. So I think that we're going to see how things go through spring training and in the regular season, depending on how the roster is constructed. But right now, I envision Cody Bellinger starting off more in center field because I just don't think PCA is going to make the opening day roster as of right now.
We'll get to PCA in a little bit later. Certainly, Busch was acquired. He's 26. He will be 27 later in the year. Matt Mervis started out, as a Cubs first base prospect, but kind of fizzled in recent years and has somewhat become an afterthought, unfortunately, even though he does have talent. Are you concerned with Busch becoming the second, coming of Mervis, or do you feel a little more confident about Michael Busch?
I think Busch's ceiling is a bit higher than Mervis. I mean, Mervis's numbers in AAA are fantastic. I mean, they're really, really good, consistently great. And, it's a bit more of a mystery with Busch, too. Neither are proven commodities, but I do think that Busch has a higher ceiling. He is a ranked prospect, and I feel like there's more of a scout on him. Mervis came up, he was a college player, and then the pandemic happened. So a lot of weird things happened, with the time he was coming up, which was completely out of his control. Busch came over here as a guy that was blocked by a talented Dodger team, a very deep system. And obviously, when you have Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts on your team, it's hard to make room for a guy like Busch. But, I was saying earlier is the dream scenario that's somewhat realistic for Busch is, could he become a Max Muncy type player? Left-handed power bat, gives you an 800 plus OPS, 30 home runs, even if he's not hitting higher than 240. You know what I mean? If his on base looks good and he's slugging, then that's what you could ask for in a guy like him. You're not looking at Michael Busch to be Anthony Rizzo by any means. Anthony Rizzo was an exceptional fielder who really had all the tools. He could get on base. He hit for average. He hit for power. He was able to put the ball in play and shorten his swing. Busch isn't quite like that. You're looking at him as more of an on-base power guy. And again, if he became Max Muncy 2.0, I think we'll be jumping for joy. Will he become that? I don't know. It's a big mystery. But if you can just slate him in, and when he plays and gives you more left-handed power, that's a huge win for the Cubs because you can never have enough left-handed power.
Moving on to the third base, obviously Christopher Morel is given the opportunity to solidify that position, but against the Angels yesterday, to be more exact, he committed some really horrifying throwing errors, which obviously raises alarm in the eyes of many Cubs fans. Certainly, Andy Shaw, the rookie from Maryland that was drafted last year, has made an impressive transition into baseball, where he ended at Double-A, and already he's been told that he won't be making the team. So more than likely, he either goes back to Double-A or he will start the year at Iowa in order
Mhm.
to give more advanced experience for possible help later in the year. Um, how long do you see Morel holding on to that third base job? And that how long do you see, where we start seeing Andy Shaw come up through the system and take over that? Do you see that by, say, no later than by All-Star break, or do you see that happening a lot earlier because Morel's, defense just isn't going to cut it?
I think with Shaw is he'll come up when the organization feels that he himself is ready. With Christopher Morel, they're really trying to work hard to make him work at third base. And there are concerns there because I think he can field okay. It's those throws that really worry you. And, not only do bad throws not get the runner, but it gives other runners extra bases. It's kind of a double whammy right there. So you heard Craig Counsell saying that they're working hard to work him in there. However, what Craig Counsell, and this is very refreshing from kind of years past, Craig Counsell, he's not married to this. He's like, listen, we're going to give this a shot and we're going to evaluate it. We're not saying that this is exactly what we're doing. This is the process which we're taking, and we're going to see how it goes. So if he doesn't think it's going to work, Craig Counsell's not going to go with it. He's going to make another decision. Right now, if you look at the 40-man roster, the best fielding third baseman is surprisingly Nick Madrigal. He made that move to third base last year with a lot of skepticism, and he played well, very, very well, surprisingly well. His defensive run saved was at a +8 last year. His outs above average was also very, very good. But, he's battling a hamstring issue, and he's got an injury history himself. So, the other guy you look at too is Patrick Wisdom. Well, Patrick Wisdom had a great year 2021 defensively. Like the defensive metrics are very good, but the last few years really dipped on the defense. It really, really, really dipped. So you can't really rely on that being an everyday solution. So are they going to rush Matt Shaw? No, but I really think they're going to do what they can to make Christopher Morel work at this point. It might have to just go with it for a while, but I think if it's bad to where Craig Counsell can't trust it, he'll look at other avenues.
Okay, and Miles Mastrobuoni obviously was a
yes. Thank you for
that
bringing
could
that
be
up.
I was going to say, we can't forget it. Obviously, he had some nice moments last year along with Mike Tuchman. Those two guys certainly, carried the Cubs for largely to a surprising degree. Mastrobuoni, Madrigal, and Wisdom, all three of them are probably more than likely battling for the roster spot. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did the Counsell already told Mastrobuoni he's making the team?
Talkman's making the team.
Oh, okay. So that was Tuchman. My apologies there.
Yep.
Okay. Now, out of the three that I just mentioned, who do you see as an odd man out of that group?
That's a great question. I know they've really liked Patrick Wisdom for a few years, and they really like that power. There's a reason they tendered him a contract. But I think that you look at the power that he provides, that's his value. He's got insane raw power. And the fact that he's hit 20 plus home runs in the majors after being a late bloomer for the last 3 years, you got to give him kudos. But with Miles Mastrobuoni, the way he kind of evolved as a hitter last year to be a bit more efficient, like he had some good at-bats towards the end of the year and actually hit fairly well. The other thing is that he gives you a positive defensive value on the infield, and he's versatile. He can play second. He can play third. He can even play in the outfield. So I think the versatility gives him a bit of an edge, even if you're using him as more of a bench guy, 26-man type. Because, one of my beasts last year was when he was struggling, they were using him as an everyday player early in the season. It's like, okay, that's not a viable option. But when they turn to him later in the year as a 26-man bench guy, hey, we need you to fill in, maybe you start once or twice a week, you come in late for defense or pinch run or pinch hit, and you could do that in multiple positions. I thought he was used much more efficiently in the second half, and that's when you got most value out of him. So We know the Cubs as a philosophy like the versatility. So I do think that does give Miles Mastrobuoni an edge.
Now let's move on to the outfield. Certainly, there's interesting talent and a lot of set right now. Ian Happ is currently out of the lineup with a hamstring injury, and there's a little bit of concern about how long he's going to be out of right now. Alex Canario came back miraculously from a horrific injury about a year before in 2022 Winter Leagues. With Happ gone, who do you see manning the left field? Is it Canario or is it Brennan Davis for the time being, in your opinion?
Brennan Davis got off to a great start in spring, a really, really good start. And the fact that a guy who battled so many injuries and then he got hit in the head, it's like he can't catch a break. I mean, he was really kind of getting his name back on the map among Cubs fans and scouts saying, hey, look, he's healthy, he's swinging well. So you would almost think that he would have, a solid shot here, but, now he sounds like he'll be okay, but, again, stunted a little bit. A few days couldn't play because of that injury. I think Canario is one of the guys that a lot of people want to see, and I think has a pretty good shot because we did get a taste of him last year on the roster, even though it was really, really small. I feel like that of the guys on the current 40-man roster, I like his chances more than anybody else. Because Kevin Alcantara is not ready for the majors. We know that. He's still a young prospect. Pico Armstrong, I think he'll be, in AAA to start the year. And with Brennan Davis, maybe he has a shot, but, he's got to stay healthy. And that's just been a real, real battle for him. So I think right now, Canario is kind of the one that I would say would be next. We know that Mike Tauchman is going to make the team. Now, if Ian Happ is healthy by opening day, Ian Happ will be your left fielder. But, I wrote about it for Cubbies Crib earlier, assuming that there's worst case scenario, because let's be real, as you and I know, hamstring issues can get really, really tricky. And sometimes they take longer to heal than anticipated. So if that time comes, I think Canario would be the most likely to make it. If there was a dark horse of a non-roster invitee, not talking about the current 40-man roster, maybe David Peralta, who they brought in as a minor league deal, would get a shot. He's a left-handed batter, very good corner outfielder, very good pinch hitter in his career. So if you're just looking at options off the 40-man roster, he would probably be the first guy I'd bring. But I think overall, factoring in both non-roster invitees and the 40-man roster, I feel like Canario will be the next guy up if that situation called for it.
Do you still have high hopes for Davis?
The talent is there. It's just, can he stay healthy? We need to see him stay healthy. It's really, it's one of those things where, like, it's out of his control. It's not talent, but you can't play if you're not healthy. And we just need to see it. It really stinks because 2-3 years ago, he was our number one prospect. And I don't know if you remember this, but in the Futures game, he hit 2 home runs and won the MVP.
He did, yes.
And he was getting from that game, like he was the center of attention from that game.
Yeah, I just hope that he gets his health on track. Certainly, concussion is obviously, we know with football, those things are certainly can impact a player but for a long period of time. So, we wish Brennan Davis, hopefully a quick and safe recovery from that injury. Yeah, absolutely. So the center field is obviously something we've discussed. Cody Bellinger more than likely will take over. Peter Crow Armstrong, the top prospect who was called up late last year, certainly unfortunately didn't hit a lot and raising concerns about his long-term future in the MLB. Are you still concerned about his hitting in the major league level, or you don't have that similar concerns right now?
Yeah, I'm not going there just yet, just because, he didn't have a lot of at-bats. It was only 15, 16 at-bats. It was a very small sample size, and he wasn't used consistently. Do I think he was ready for the big leagues last year regardless? No, I really didn't. So I just feel like this is a work in progress right now. And, even if he isn't an elite hitter, if he hits well enough, I think we can safely say he's going to be an elite defender. So even if he doesn't hit the ceiling of his offense, if he does enough to stay in the big leagues, he'll be a big leaguer as a defensive asset. He's got, he's got that speed where you can say, you know what? If we need you to pinch run, you could pinch run, and then you can play center field late in the game for defense at the very least. So no, I'm not worried yet. Do I think it's possible that maybe the bat has some kinks to work out and there is a reason to think, hey, he might not hit the highest of offensive ceilings? I do, but I think that if they properly develop him and they take the right steps, there's still a good chance that he can be an effective tool player that can hit and defend and run.
Now, in the right field, Seiya Suzuki bounced back nicely late in the second half after what was a terrible first half. He got benched in the in the second half by Ross, and that thankfully spurred a surge for him. What is your realistic expectation for him? What is your realistic expectation for Suzuki this upcoming year?
Well, I'm a big Suzuki believer, a big fan of him, and I think that when we saw him get benched last year, I think there was one very important element of that. And it's in addition to just mental, but I think physical, because if you remember, to start the year, he was injured. He got hurt in spring training, and then he had to come back. So combine the fact that he was fighting his way back, and I also think that he wasn't fully 100% even when he came back. I still think that he was still feeling something, not feeling right. So not only was sitting on the bench a way for him to mentally reset, but I think physically reset too. He was able to regain focus. He kind of rested up a little bit. He felt better physically and mentally. And then we saw him crush the ball. So I think he just needed that little reset, both physically and mentally, because there were times where he would swing when he was struggling and you saw kind of a grimace, and it made you think, like, is he really 100% healthy? So assuming a full bill of health, I think we can expect 25 plus homers from Suzuki. I would love to see another 800 OPS season from Suzuki. I feel like spring training so far, he swung the bat very well. He hit a home run the other day. Could have had two. Jake Marisnick robbed him of one, but he's hitting the ball hard. The swing looks good. So I expect good things from him this year.
Yeah, I was following him on some of the interviews in Japanese that he was doing. He said that he really struggled to find rhythm since coming over to the United States. And, he was really confused with the approach, and that I think he finally started to, let it go, and then just let the pitch come to him and just start, attacking those pitches early and often.
Yeah.
So, and we saw that results in the second half. If he can finally put it all together, I don't think 30 home runs and maybe even 100 RBIs is not certainly out of a question, because the Cubs certainly could use more hitters like that in their lineup. So we'll close out the outfield with another young prospect, Owen Casey, who have been very, very hot in the spring training. And, he was a key piece that was acquired in the Yu Darvish trade from the Padres. And thankfully, it looks like, thankfully, or even unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, out of the all the prospects that the Cubs got from the Yu Darvish trade, he is probably the only one that is going to not only, make it to the major leagues, but looks to be a bona fide star.
Yeah.
Assuming he's going to start in Iowa, what is your long-term future? What do you see a long-term future with Casey? Either in left or either in right field. Do you see?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. They have such an abundance of outfielders. You question how he's going to fit in eventually, and I do think that he could one day get a real shot at being a DH, because right now DH is kind of up in the air right now. We don't have a set DH right now going forward, and things can change as we go, but I do feel like in the future there is a possibility that he could have a future as a DH, and then maybe kind of a rotating where you say, hey, some guys can play DH someday while he plays in right field. Maybe if Suzuki gets time at DH and he plays in right, or vice versa. So I feel like he'll have that opportunity to play both in the field and DH, because for a while I thought, hey, maybe this guy is a valuable trade chip, and he still might be. But, there's a part of me watching him where I think, man, do we really want to trade him because he's got such an upside? But it is going to depend on what's out there. So, it's one of those things where you let the future kind of come to him, whether that's on the team or part of a trade chip. And then if it is on the team, there's multiple options on where he can go. But I would personally not be as surprised to see him being like a DH candidate at some point, just if there's so much of an abundance of outfielders that it's hard to squeeze him in there. But, again, another left-handed bat with power. That's value that you like.
Mm-hmm. My guest tonight is Alex Patt, the writer for the Cubbiescrib.com, talking about the 2024 Chicago Cubs. Alex, the question regarding the Craig Counsell's hiring really raised expectations.
Yes.
For the Cubs. What do you see as the biggest difference between Craig Counsell versus David Ross?
Well, I think there's a few differences. I mean, one thing is I truly do feel like Craig Counsell is more empowered by the front office than David Ross, because I feel like David Ross was working more on the front office, kind of with what their envision was, where bringing in Craig Counsell, Jed Hoyer understands that you're going to have more power to be given to Craig Counsell because so much of Milwaukee's success, look what he's been able to do with Milwaukee, where he plugs in guys, how he evaluates, and we've seen him just work with so many, veterans, journeymen, and he makes it work. So that's the kind of success we want to see here. So, having that empowerment, that makes a difference. And, of course, Jed Hoyer is going to construct a roster the way he wants, but, Craig Counsell making the lineups, choosing where to evaluate guys, he's got that power. And I think that's a big difference, just in the preseason. Going forward, I think that you're going to see Craig Counsell, the way he constructs lineups, he does it with a philosophy of, putting your best players in the best positions and not liking to bunt nearly as much. He said that clearly at CubsCon. So there were times last year when you saw weird moments. Why is Patrick Wisdom bunting, or why is he batting here, or why is Hosmer batting here? I think you're going to see optimal lineups the way Craig Counsell wants. And that's just going to kind of come as the season goes. We're going to see how he constructs lineups. What's he going to do with the leadoff? Is he going to value Ian Happ's ability to get on base? Is he going to value Nico Horner's ability to put the ball in play? When Craig Counsell makes those types of decisions, there's going to be an added confidence, because we know that his lineup construction has a history of success when he hasn't had in Milwaukee, the murderer's row. He didn't have the 27 Yankees up in Milwaukee, and we saw him plug in the right guys in the right spots, both offensively and defensively. So when you want to talk about a big difference between, David Ross and Craig Counsell, when he says he's going to put Morel at third and evaluate, that he's doing his due diligence, and he's not just saying, okay, there he is, that's our decision, that's what we're going with. There's an evaluation process, and I think an evaluation process like to the sophistication we haven't seen before. And, maybe us as fans can do a few things on the eye test, but Craig Counsell, he's the best evaluator of anybody on that field. So, he's going to make decisions that are going to have full confidence in.
I know people joke that they hired Craig Counsell, stole him away from Milwaukee. And, with the lack of movements in the offseason, they basically thought that getting Craig Counsell to do, to get the most out of less was the only option. But moving into that subject of the ownership and Jed Hoyer, how committed do you think both are, with this Cubs moving forward? We talked about the marquee, the revenue, and the Cubs' lack of commitment to, paying over $200 million, of other, free agents. Let's just say, for example, moving forward, Andy Shaw or even Cade Horton and the other youngsters who start to, develop and turn into like a legit all-star slash, MVP winners in their third or fourth year. Eventually, the Cubs will be forced to pony up. If they, the biggest concern that I have is if they can't commit spending that kind of money on other free agents. I don't know how in the world they're going to commit that kind of money on keeping their own free agents. Is that a valid concern, or am I being just fretting too much?
Well, I think it's all a legitimate concern and question that people have. Now, when I look at the Cubs, I think the commitment to winning is there. It's just they play by a certain philosophy. They have a certain line in the sand they want to draw. They will go out and say, listen, we will get valued players, but we're not going to pass a threshold that we draw the line in the sand in. And I think that can be a good thing. I also think that sometimes it takes them away from taking advantage of an opportunity because they have money to pay these guys. They're sticking to a philosophy. It's kind of like if you want to do a cross Chicago reference, look at what Ryan Poles is doing with the Bears and some of these players, the extensions they're giving, what he's willing to, there's a vision and kind of a threshold on where they want to be. And again, I agree with some of it. I don't always agree with it. I think if there is an opportunity to get a bona fide superstar that might cost you more, you take that advantage. And I don't always think the Cubs are willing to take advantage. And that does frustrate me. But, they're also trying to, I know it drives people crazy, but the intelligent spending, last year we had those shortstops on the market. And going into there, I'm like, oh man, Carlos Correa, he is the number one guy. He's the guy I want. They went with Dansby Swanson, and that ended up being a really good move. He didn't make as much as Xander Bogaerts or Trey Turner, but, he ended up being a very valuable asset for the Cubs because they value the contract that they were giving him. It was within their parameters, and they liked the defensive assets that he brought. It felt like he was a good fit for them. So I think the commitment is there. They're following a certain philosophy. It just might not always be what we want because the philosophy that they have and the commitment they have isn't always to either our standards or to our liking. There are times more where I do wish they would spend more on certain guys and plug certain holes. I really do. I don't think that they should be afraid to go into the first tier of the luxury tax because, listen, I get it. It's not like you go a little bit over, you only pay a little bit. Like once you're over that threshold, you got to pay that threshold, no matter how much over you are. But I think you can afford to do that if that means adding one more significant piece to your staff, whether it's a pitcher, whether it's a first baseman, outfielder, whatever it is. I think it's worth for them going to the luxury tax to make your team even better than it could be. But, at the same time, you say, okay, the deal for Minaga is very smart. The deal for Cody Bellinger turned out to be very good. You had very reasonable and well thought out extensions for guys like Ian Happ and Nico Horner. Those, I think, are all really, really good things. So, yes, sometimes it is frustrating. Sometimes I do get frustrated, but I think that they're not just doing it to, quote, be cheap, even though you wish they would spend a little more, but they're doing it with this philosophy in mind, saying, we want to commit to what we think makes sense and to what we think we can look at in the future in terms of the assets we built up. Because in terms of farm system, they are rich. They are very, very rich. And those farm assets turn into currency when it comes for trade time. So I think they keep that in mind too. They say, hey, listen, we plan to be in contention. we have a huge farm system, very, very deep.
Yep.
And you're going to use that as currency to buy at the deadline. So, they envision that too. And again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but they have a vision, they have their philosophy, and I do think it is committed to winning, even if it isn't always within what we want and what it could, in our opinion, be, because there are times I think it could be bigger and better vision, but they have a vision, they do want to win in the short answer.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's end on this note. A couple of questions looking around the rest of the MLB. Let's start off with the NL Central.
Mm-hmm.
Will the Cubs win the Central?
They have a chance, but I'm not sure if they're going to win it. I think that they have a good shot at a wild card. They certainly have a shot at division. The thing with the NL Central is that the bar to win the Central in terms of wins needed is probably not very high, maybe mid-high 80s. We're not looking at requiring to win 95 plus games to win the division. The problem is you have a lot of competition right next to you. So I got to be honest with you, that Reds team worries me. I think that team is going to be very, very good, and they got a lot of talent, and that team very well could win the division. You look at St. Louis. I don't think their pitching is very good. I don't think on paper they overly scare me, but you know what? They're the Cardinals. They had an awful season last year, and there's just that feeling that the scales might tip back. They are not bad very often. That was far and away the worst season. I'm going to be 30 years old in 2 months, and that was far and away the worst season the Cardinals ever had. I mean, even in the quote bad seasons they've had in my lifetime, they're still having winning seasons. So last season was very, very unusual for them. And while I don't think that they're a powerhouse, you can never truly count them out. And then I don't think the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to win the division, but I do think they're going to be better than some people think they will be. I think they're going to be a bit pesky. I think they got some young talent on, themselves. They got Paul Skeens, the number one pitching prospect. They have O'Neal Cruz coming back. You got Brian Hayes. You got Brian Reynolds. You have that catching prospect that they have. Again, not saying a postseason team, but I don't think they're going to be a pushover. And I know they lost Craig Counsell. And I know they traded away Corbin Burns. And I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but I do think Milwaukee is still going to be somewhat competitive. They're going to find a way to do it.
I'm going to put my homerism and say the Cubs will win the division. They'll probably win, finish at around maybe 91 or 71 record and probably edge out the Reds. I do think that the Reds will probably have one of the wild card spot there. NL East, Braves or Phillies?
That's a good question. Both teams have the power. Ronald Acuna is one of the best hitters I've ever seen. He is truly a marvel. What I do think Philly has a little bit of an edge, though, is I think their pitching is a little better. And when that whole lineup is hitting, that is a good lineup. The Braves have been kind of the powerhouse team the last few years. I might give an edge to Philly this year.
Mm-hmm. And Phillies win, and the Braves will get the wild card, right?
Right. Yeah, I think they'll both be in the postseason for sure.
Okay. NL West, it's pretty much a runaway for the Dodgers, right?
Yes, and what's funny is that they might win that division by 15 games, but you know what? The Diamondbacks are still going to be pushing for the postseason. The Giants are going to be competitive, I think. I don't know about quite postseason, but they've made some moves themselves. They signed that one outfielder from Japan. He's pretty good. They just signed Matt Chapman. That gives you a third baseman and a good glove over there. Right. I wonder how good their pitching is going to be, but they find ways to pitch well over the years. So I wouldn't count the Giants out being in the playoff race. And the Padres, I think, will be competitive too. Obviously, I think that last year they didn't have a great year, but I think there were numbers to say, hey, they had a little bit of bad luck last year. Like they lost a ton of one-run games. Sure. So they'll be competitive in the mix. And then the Rockies will probably be the worst team in baseball. So they're not even in the equation. But yeah, I'm currently picking them in a bet pool for the Rockies to have the worst record in baseball. And it's tough. Yeah. So I think it's got to be between them and probably Oakland. It's a
Yep.
tough decision.
It is. It is. Absolutely.
I just think the Rockies might have that loss edge just because they play in the same division as the Dodgers, the Giants, the Diamondbacks. So that's tough to compete in.
It's a tough to compete in that division.
Yeah.
And the winner of the NL is LA or somebody else?
Yeah, no, right now I just have to go
I'll
with
pick the LA right now.
I mean, it's hard not to when you add Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto and Blake, not Blake Snell, the other guy,
Tyler Glasnow.
Glasnow. Thank you. Although with Glasnow, you do have concerns about his health, but when he's healthy, when he pitches, he's nasty. He's really, really good. And even if he does go through an injury, you still got Yamamoto, you still got Clayton Kershaw, you still got plenty of arms.
Walker Buehler too, yeah.
Walker Buehler, yes, a very underrated. I mean, that team is beyond stacked. I think the one thing that the Dodgers might just need to figure out a little more as we go on is their bullpen. But when you have the lineup that's that good and a starting rotation that's as good as it is, you'll be able to figure that out.
Right. It's basically a do or die time for Dave Roberts for sure. All right. Let's move on to the AL East. I think it's Baltimore's time right now. You think?
Yeah, that team is really good. And remember, they're good now. The number one prospect in baseball, Jackson Holliday, hasn't even arrived on the big leagues yet. So when they get him, and man, was adding Corbin Burns, what a massive ad that was for them. And not only was that a big ad, that they got him on a deal. I mean, they did not have to trade a massive haul for him like I thought they would. That to me felt like an absolute steal by the Orioles. And you had Corbin Burns with that lineup with those young guys, and then Jackson Holliday comes up. I mean, Adley Rutschman is already really, really good. He's only going to get better. And remember that team, like, I think they lost like a near 120 games a few years ago. Like they were one of the worst teams anyone has ever seen. Like you would have to go back to like the 19 teens when the Cleveland Spiders were like the worst team ever. Like nobody in this generation saw a team that bad. And they lost a number of games around. I mean, they lost 100 games year in, year out for a number of years. And that losing has paid off. It freed up some space. It gave them a great farm system with the great picks. And here they are. And that division is stacked too, because the Rays are going to be good. The Yankees are going to be in the mix. Frankly, right now, I think last place is going to be Boston. And we're not used to saying that a lot.
That's true. Do you think Holiday gets to the major leagues this year?
Yeah. I mean, he's shooting up the rankings. There's a reason he's the number one prospect in baseball, and when you have the pedigree that he does, you're gonna move up pretty quickly. I mean, you remember how quickly Chris Bryant made up through the ranks. He was drafted in 2013, and he made his debut in early 2015. Same with Kyle Schwarber. He was drafted in 2014 and made his debut in 2015. So when you have the pedigree of a top prospect like that, you can move up pretty fast.
So Baltimore for the division. I'm going to give the Yankees a wild card, I would say.
Yeah, Juan Soto was a huge addition for them.
Yeah, even if it's only for 1 year rental, hopefully it's going to be a worthwhile acquisition. AL Central. I still have Minnesota. Although Detroit is my sleeper right now.
Yeah, Detroit might be able to make some noise here. They've made some moves. They've developed some guys. I think Spencer Torkelson is finally coming around. He got off to a really slow start in the majors, but he's starting to, I think, find his groove in the majors. I think he's got a ton of talent, great power. Jack Flaherty, potentially sneaky good move. He's got great stuff. He's just been so injured over the past few years. But, maybe he rebounds and is a decent pitcher, in that rotation. So I think they definitely are a sleeper. I also think, too, that Cleveland has found ways to compete over the years, even if the roster isn't. They're kind of like the Brewers of the AL. I mean, you remember in 2022, they ran away with the AL Central, and they were able to do it with pitching and defense. And Cleveland has been so good at developing pitching and defense. So Am I picking them to win the division? They're not my favorite, but I don't think you can just fully rule them out yet. Although
Right.
I think that at least the Twins have the higher percentage. I mean, they lost Sonny Gray, but you still have enough talent on that team, I think, to compete for a really bad division like that.
And finally, the AL West. I would think it boils down to Texas and Houston, and then those two, no matter where they finish, I have a strong feeling they'll still be in the postseason. But
Yes.
I do like Texas's youth, and they're on the roll. Obviously, they don't fear Houston anymore, having conquered them last year. I know Houston did suffer some off-season losses now, so I'm gonna go with Texas.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth between Texas and Houston. Texas just won the World Series, and like you said, they have some youth, and they got Corey Seager. Aldolis Garcia is one of the most exciting players in baseball. They're going to be on that high. It, you know, But on the other side, Houston, you just can never count them out now. Look at the success they had.
Yeah.
Texas might have just won the World Series, but you know what? Houston's been the dynasty since 2017. And even after they were, they were banging trash cans and stealing signs, guess what? They went on to continue to make the ALCS, win pennants, and win more World Series championships. So that team is really, really hard to bet against. But I think there's something to be said. It's natural to go in a season. Hey, you give the benefit of the doubts to the defending champs, and Texas is the defending champs. And then I think just below them, you can't fully count Seattle out either. I don't know if Seattle's going to quite make it, but they're going to at least be in the competitive mix. You still have Luis Castillo, and it's still a really good team overall, but I just don't think it's quite good enough to be at the level of Texas or Houston.
Right, and it certainly helps that you have Anaheim and Oakland. We're battling for the last place in that.
Yeah, those teams
right
are.
now.
Yeah, they're going to be. I mean, Oakland is going to be at the very bottom. They're probably going to have the worst record in the American League, and then the Angels are going to be right down there, which is a damn shame because Mike
Trout's career is basically.
Yeah, it's sad because he's what he is. He's the baseball player that defined this generation, and he very well played an entire career without winning a postseason series. It really is a shame.
It is. All right, ML World Series pick. I'll go with. I know it's a cop out, but I'm going to pick Baltimore and the Dodgers.
Hey, it's hard not to go that route. I mean, right now, you look at the favorites in the American League. I think the top three, in my opinion, Houston, Texas, and Baltimore. Right. I think those got to be your top three favorites. Because you can look at some of the other teams in the American League and say, okay, you and I both talked about the Yankees making the postseason. Sure, they can make the postseason. Do they have the pitching, though? I'm not so sure. I just don't know if they have the pitching. And, pitching was the big concern with Baltimore last year.
Right.
And when they made that move to get Corbin Burnes, that was a huge, huge turn of events for them. And you remember, too, that there was a lot of rumors about Dylan Cease. People thought Dylan Cease could be that thing. But the White Sox were asking for the moon for Dylan Cease, and for good reason, too. Dylan Cease didn't have quite as good of a year as Corbin Burnes, but what Dylan Cease has is 2 years of control instead of the just one. In terms of trade value, that makes a huge difference. But those have got to be your three right there. And I think with the ceiling of talent, it's hard not to pick Baltimore, even though Texas has more established talent. You have Corey Seager and you have Adolis Garcia in that lineup. But, I don't think it's crazy to think Baltimore can win the pennant. I think they got a great shot to win the pennant.
Who's your pick?
I'm going to go along with you and pick Baltimore.
Okay. Baltimore versus Dodgers?
Yeah, I mean, we saw the Diamondbacks do what they did last year, and, we watch the Dodgers every year. Oh, yeah, they won 110 games, but, when the postseason comes around, they're going to falter again. But, the way they're stacked right now, it's hard to bet against them. Obviously, I think the Phillies have a great shot at the pennant too. I think the Braves have a shot at the pennant. My top three teams in the NL in terms of pennant chances would be Dodgers, Braves, Philly. So as good as the Diamondbacks were last year and as competitive as they'll be, I'm still not going to put the Diamondbacks above Atlanta or Philly as of right now. But you added freaking Shohei Ohtani to a lineup of Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman,
Right. And
Max
Muncy too.
Muncy.
Right.
Yeah, and even Will Smith, great hitting catcher. Really, really good. I mean, really, you can look at it and say your weakest point is probably like shortstop, because what is that, Miguel Rojas still? It's solid
or Gavin Lux.
Oh yeah, if he's healthy, yes.
Yeah, that's a big.
If he's healthy,
question.
he's really good. But it's just it's funny because like you mentioned the Dodgers, and you're like, oh yeah, Gavin Lux, he's a thing, and then you look at the rotation, all those guys they have. I mean, Shohei Ohtani is going to be the highlight of the Dodgers now, which is crazy because you have other MVPs on that team too.
Right.
Freddie Freeman is one of the best first basemen in baseball. He's been an MVP caliber player for how long now? And Mookie Betts was an MVP. Yeah. And look how long Mookie Betts has been around. He was MVP, I believe, in 2018 when the Red Sox won 108 games and won the World Series. Exactly. With Boston, you have multiple MVPs, and then you had Shohei Ohtani. It's hard to bet against that.
No. Well, Alex, it was a pleasure to discuss Cubs with you. I really am looking forward to this upcoming season. I hope to have you on at some point again, as either as a solo or as another guest. If you're watching this and if you've never followed Alex on Twitter or X, make sure to follow Alex on Twitter. You can see the scrolling at the bottom, and you could also follow his work on cubbiescrib.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yep. It is Cubbies Crib, CRIB.com, a part of the Fan-Sided Sports Network. Alex, thanks for your time tonight, and we look forward to having you on again at some point during the season. Have a wonderful week, and look forward to having you on again.
Well, thank you. I had a great time. Always a pleasure talking, and I'll definitely be back.
Thank you very much, and thanks for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you next week for another episode of the Double A Team Podcast.